Hi, my name is Michael Gerstenhaber. I'm a VP of Product Management at Anthropic, and I'm here to talk with Ben Kus at Box about agents and agentic workflows.
Hi, I'm Ben Kus. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Box, and I am excited to be here to talk about AI and AI agents and everything AI related.
Great. Ben, great to be with you today. Box has made AI agents a cornerstone of your AI strategy. What drove this focus? And could you walk us through some examples of how you're implementing it, how customers are using it?
Yeah. So we're, in general, just a big fan of the agentic approach overall. Because if you think about sort of when, with Box, so we're the content platform. We have 115,000 enterprise customers. They're across all industries. They're across all geographies. And they just, and every customer is different, and they have different types of content. They have different things that matter to them that are represented in these files and these different ways that they sort of put their unstructured thoughts down, and then they communicate and they collaborate. And so with something like when generative AI came along, we thought it was amazing because suddenly, for the first time, we were able to do things where the AI can actually understand what people were working on. The old world, we had we've been through this big data revolution where we had structured data and in different forms and great technologies and great tools that are able to do more and more with the data. But unstructured data, which is by far the bulk of the data, was kind of left out of it. You just kind of took a person to sit down and read that, or to create that, or to watch it, or to listen to it, and so on. And so now with AI, we have had the ability to use AI across the board to have people use AI to help them, almost like an assistant, to interact with their content. And so this has been great for years, right? This is we've been in the middle of all of this. We're loving all of the new things that you guys make, all of the different capabilities that are coming out. But then at a certain point, you look at it and you say, there's only so much you can do with a question and a response, or with a prompt and an answer. And many of our customers, when they're thinking about what is possible with content and with AI, or what's possible even in the enterprise overall, they have these bigger thoughts, like, I have this set of things that I need to do with my content that takes a long time, and therefore my customers are getting a worse experience. Or I have internally something that people don't want to do, or it takes too long, or we have to hire people to do a task that then is a lot of turnover because it's not their favorite task. And then that kind of thing, they're like, can I use AI to help me with those? Not only is it faster, but it can be take more of the load off of people to concentrate on more important things. So when we think about this, we quickly hit, there's almost no way for us to program specifically everything that our customers would want to do with content. And instead, we said, well, how can we have the AI help us figure out what to do? And this is where the idea of agentic AI and AI agents, and sort of the idea not necessarily of an AI assistant, but of an AI coworker, an AI team that works for you to go do these things. This really has opened up a whole new world for us, not only in how we make AI functionality, which just in general, almost everything we're doing is agentic now, agentic RAG, agentic document extraction, but then also to the idea that we can customize with our customers the agentic workflows so they can do more.
Yeah, we're very, very excited about this kind of goal-oriented virtual collaborator style of agent that you guys are building. I know it's still early days, but can you share a little bit about how the agents has impacted your customers?
Yeah. So one of the things, when we had the older approach that is the idea of a AI-based sort of assistant response, we had hit these problems with it that would have our customers sometimes say, this is good, and I really like this, but it's not quite the thing that I will actually make the biggest difference. So we sort of are in this hitting the limits of the AI assistants. So one example, one of the things we do well that we do and we've launched recently is this idea of metadata extraction, or data extraction from structured data from your unstructured content. So the typical way you do this is you go through and you first you do some OCR steps, and then you kind of look once you do that, you kind of have AI models go through and look structure the content, and models are very good at this. But if you sort of see what a human does, is some these documents take different forms. And sometimes people do things like cross stuff out, or they do things where they write something else in there. And so we can do things where have OCR pick that up, but unless you're careful, you kind of can lose the information of seeing this kind of document. Yep. And so an answer to that would be to say, well, have the AI not only read through the text, but also look at the document. And it's almost like a two-step pass where you're okay, got the text, go through it, and then take a look at the overall document as if you're like flipping through the pages to look for things. And in that approach, it works a lot better. So we call this like agentic document extraction. And it's like a multi-step. Like first do this, then often like a grader and to reflect on the results, and then oftentimes have like another agent look at the pictures of the pages. And then that kind of thing is something that we could have just built from like functionally like from scratch, but we find ourselves like playing with different techniques. And then the agentic approach to do that is actually way more accurate than the things that we had built before, or any single pass of any AI model that we found.
That makes sense. And it's so hard in many cases to describe exactly step by step how to solve a problem.
Yeah.
But if you know what the problem is to be solved and you trust the intelligence of the model, ideally the model can self-correct while it's doing it.
Yeah.
Right?
Like so you've described the agentic approach as a directed graph of steps, right?
Yes.
And I love that because if you think of it that way, then you just start to say, to solve this, I need to add a step, or I need to modify a step, as opposed to like create a new application or a new program to do this thing that was like, which typically is very involved, it's very specific about how you do it, and then oftentimes it's hard to describe fully what you want in that sort of historical way we programmed. And using the power of like intelligence, you can actually have it figure out what to do along the way.
And it's also a bad user experience to force the user to describe so precisely exactly what they need or else fail, right?
And this is also one of the challenges I think we should talk about, but it is something that is, when you do it well, it's amazing how something almost so simple as an agentic, like we call them agentic routines, can actually produce so much value compared to like the way that we did it even a year ago.
That makes sense. How has Box incorporated some best practices we discussed in developing your AI agent strategy, particularly given your role managing sensitive content?
Yeah, so for us, one of the big challenges with anything AI is that enterprises, I think still to this day, have a challenge where they're worried about AI.
Yes.
And this gets in the way of adoption in many times, because you have to not only make sure your data is secure, because everything when you have data sharing amongst any system, you have to make sure you trust not only who you're giving data to, but who they also are giving their data to. So this is this like very long world of sub-processors and trust and security and compliance and so on. And so when you introduce a new fundamental giant thing like AI, then customers need to naturally will be like, hold on, before I use this, I need to make sure.
They have to understand it.
Yeah. Yep. And so we're kind of lucky being Box in that we have the customers trust us with their data. So then we just have to now prove to them in all ways, contractually, transparently, technically, why we are able to do AI in a trustworthy, enterprise-grade way. And so one way we did that is we introduced these AI principles that talk about the way that we let the customer control the AI, like not only the models they select, but also how they apply AI. And we document very explicitly our security and privacy, and we also try to be as transparent as possible, meaning like, we're not here to say we have some proprietary technique that only we can do AI. We're here to say this is how we are able to take our customers' content and then apply AI to it in a way that is safe and secure and meets all their needs. And then importantly, there's this big question of like, well, who actually owns the thing that's input and output of the process? And so one of our approaches, which is that the interaction between agents, the input and the output, is something that we consider to be sort of treated as what we call content, meaning that for customers if we are holding their sensitive or their often very sensitive unstructured content, it's theirs.
Yes.
And our job is to be the custodians of it temporarily, but we can't look at it. Like we have strict controls across the board, contractual and security, and we consider the input and output to AI to also be in that category. And in fact, it's the same systems that power it. So in that way, if you care about data residency, if you care about your encryption keys, if you care about all these different things enterprises care about, we can have it actually directly apply to what would be an agent conversation in the same way we do it for like a human conversation.
One of the fascinating things about Box and this conversation with Box is the breadth of different kinds of data that you have. It's not from one domain or whatever. I am curious how you think about permissioning and security, and specifically bringing a human into the loop in permission.
Yeah. So one of the key things that we think is incredibly important is that anytime you're doing AI on any platform, any system, anywhere, the AI needs to respect the permissions of the people.
So it's impersonating me as a person. It doesn't have its own service account or something.
Exactly. Now, there may be an interesting world where you can think of it as an agent that you give access to something, but like it should never have access to everything, because it won't know how to enforce. In the same way, you don't necessarily rely on like a single person to have access to everything in a company. In fact, very few people or nobody has access to all of the data of any one company. And so so we have our AI respect the permissions of the person when they do it. So if you ask an AI to search on your behalf, it's on your behalf using the exact same systems that we would then say that what you have permission to. And that's a really critical, important step for us, because if you don't do that, you have a big challenge. And then there's an interesting world where at some point, if you're sharing, like if you want to have a conversation not only with different agents, but also collaborate with different people. So there's almost this like, I'm on a team and I have a team of agents, and how do they work together? And we started to actually get on this path of thinking of this as the same way that you collaborate with other people. We might have the world where you're collaborating with these agents, especially when they're focused on a specific task and you say, only consider this piece of data. There's like this, well, how do you share data with people? Well, I share and I click and then I know they have access to it. And that kind of approach we think is very interesting for this new upcoming world of agents.
So do they materialize documents and pass documents? Do they send prompts back and forth? How do they interact?
So from a sort of at the user level, the idea would be you would have a conversation with the AI agents who would then be able to then work with you in the same way, like if there was a bunch of people and you were on like chatting with them on Slack or whatever messaging system. And so that's one sort of mental model. Now, in terms of the underlying aspects of it, you would basically be sharing with them as, and we would basically consider them to be a user in certain situations, and then you like actually grant them permissions to do such things.
That's great. That's really interesting. How else is agent engineering different from traditional engineering, and what are some of the challenges besides permissioning that you encountered?
So I think the thing that everybody who has an agentic approach is still working through is this idea of if you're asking a bunch of AI steps along a way, even if you do a good job to try to control it, you end up like sort of accumulating errors.
Occurring errors, yeah, absolutely, we see it.
And so if you're, and it's funny because if you do a good job, you will often not see those errors because you put supervisors and because you put like steps along the way to make sure that you don't have those.
Makes sense.
Until like you've accumulated sort of a rare error, and so you have this thing where there's a fundamental like non-deterministic aspect of the way that this works, and this really throws off, I think, people, programmers, people who are consuming the applications, because they're used to the idea that computers always work the same way.
Yes.
and if there's now, interestingly, I don't think you think this of people.
No, definitely not.
Yeah,
we hear this all the time.
Yeah, and so there's this interesting world where you sort of like, if you asked a person to do something and they gave you a response, and then you ask 100 different people the thing, and you realize you get different responses. But you can get, like you can have work be done with teams of people, even they're different, and even new people, and even like people from different teams. But if your agents respond differently, you say, the natural reaction is to say, this is not how computers work. So two things you learn is, one is you have to start to think of the way that you sort of operate with agentic systems as not the same, but like in the ballpark of how you operate with somebody who might be coming from a slightly different mindset, that might not have all the context, that might not understand everything you're saying, like, and therefore you find ways to adjust for it. Instead of saying, oh, this person, like, this didn't work, therefore people don't work, and therefore I'm not going to talk to people anymore about this problem. Instead, you think of ways by which you'd have a better interaction with them. And I think that this mentality is what will be not only something that people who provide agentic routine, like solutions like us, need to fix, but also the new way you kind of start to operate when dealing with like the computers and the AI agents in the future.
We hear examples where agents are enforcing policies on behalf of a merchant or somebody who has a policy, let's say. And statistically, they make the right decision more frequently than a human, but it is way less acceptable to the end user when it declines something in the process.
So, question for you on this. So what advice do you have to people like me or somebody else building on your solution? Because at some point, it's like, you might be like, use our models, use our tools, and figure that out. Or you might be, well, this is something that we believe the models will get better at over time, or something where you believe that like there's good techniques that you've seen people who utilize.
Yeah, I'm really excited about some of this discussion about like a supervisor doing evaluations at the same time as the model trying to self-correct its own behavior, which we do see get better model after model. But ultimately, like you say, there will always be some stochasticity, just like with humans, right? I think one of the best patterns that I have seen, especially in policy enforcement, is always to fail open from the perspective of the consumer, of the end user. If the publisher can absorb the risk and will absorb less risk because statistically the policy will be enforced more frequently correctly, then always just fail open. No consumer wants to be told they can't transact a return or they're banned from something by a robot, even if they would forgive a human because they have a path to escalation. Also, in the UX, you can offer paths to escalation and that sort of thing.
So we both now use this term, like we're describing AI and we're talking about it, just like a human. And I'm curious in your experiences of when do you actually stop thinking of it as a large language model that predicts next word output to the way that you think about, let's say, interacting with a person?
I am largely there, to be honest. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased, but I do find that human and thinking metaphors are very, very useful and more increasingly accurate to describe the way it behaves and the way that engineers build systems, right? It has to fail as gracefully as a human is using it and that sort of thing. And a lot of the UX patterns are shared, where information hierarchy is important, the way you present data is important, the way you think about graceful failures is important to the interaction.
So in a moment ago, you just used this term, like, let's add a supervisor, right? This is like a thing that's funny. Like, and I think people who don't think about AI agents all day long, this is almost like jarring. Like, you're gonna do what? You're gonna have an AI that like supervises this? And they're like, well, what's the protocol, how that works? You're like, no, the AI will just watch
check.
and supervise.
Is it correct?
And so I've noticed something interesting, and I don't know if you've seen this, is that like, if let's say that you have a little agentic workflow and you add a supervisor, you get less creative output.
Yep, that makes sense.
And which is exactly, if you went to business school, that you would see is, or like, you read the different books, you say, if you put 10 people in a room and you ask them to creatively think of something, and then you put their supervisor in the room, it's a very different interaction.
Yes.
So it's an interesting question of like, are we taking this metaphor too far if we're thinking about like the relation to all of these sort of principles when we manage and think of people as the best way to get output from AI agents?
I mean, I do think you have to think about it from the product perspective as well. If your process can absorb some risk of failure, if it can do that, then you can use one pattern. You can avoid the supervisor. You can trust the model to self-correct, or even see what happens, turn the temperature up on the model or something, right? Whereas if you need it to be more consistent, the more consistent you need it to be, the more constrained you need to make the process. Either way, you want to accomplish a goal. And again, you have to decide in the product whether or not you can absorb the failure of meeting that goal, or you need it to meet it every single time.
Yeah. I kind of wonder, as this all continues to evolve, is if the terminology, like the best practices of how to handle AI agents in general, will start to pull upon the best practices of business management, managing people. But correct, for a moment, like as Anthropic, like is there a world where you say, obviously, because the models inherently, their job is to mimic this behavior, so therefore it's a natural consequence, or is it maybe that it's that's a step too far? They don't quite mimic at that level. Don't rely on them in that way. Be very cautious of how you approach it.
I do think of all of this as metaphor, to be honest, and I think reasonable minds will disagree. Usually when a customer, because I'm building a platform, an AI platform, right? I'm not as much on the Claude chat side. And when I'm building a platform, it's really, I'm delegating to the product managers and the business people of my customers to decide what their product should do. And to the degree that I can describe things with this metaphor, I think that's useful, but it's still up to them to decide what their product is going to do.
Got it.
How do you think about like evaluating? Like there's the supervisor that's doing perhaps real-time evaluations. There's the model that's thinking to itself about whether or not it's on the way to accomplishing this task. But how do you at Box affirm that, yes, this is a high-quality product at the end of the day?
Yeah, this is, so for us, this is not only incredibly important, right? Because if people sit down and try AI and it doesn't work, then they
They bounce quick.
Yeah.
Yes, everybody's
And-
coming in
yeah.
skeptical these days. Yeah.
And sometimes because we have a series of features in what we call Box AI. We have the ability to ask questions on a document. We have the ability to like ask questions on a corpus of data. We have the ability to structure documents. And so all these are kind of like what we call Box AI features. And we think of it like the AI helps you do these things. And so for every piece of functionality we publish, we create an eval set. And challenge one is, again, lots of different customers, lots of different types of files. So we have these giant eval sets with these giant kind of interactions that we perceive to be the kinds of things our customers are doing. And as an enterprise company, we don't have the benefit of ever like being able to like see what people are doing. We can't see and so this is a challenge that enterprise companies have, or hopefully I recommend that they
often have. Yes.
Is so that and so we don't have the let me see when it's a good interaction versus bad, to make a training set associated with it. So instead, what we do is we create these eval sets where we kind of have a sense of these are the kind of documents that people typically will have. Yep. These are the kind of questions people typically will ask, and these are the kind of answers people typically will get. And then we evaluate every new thing that comes in that context. So if, as we're adjusting prompts, models, configuration options, we're able to then get the natural benefits of the eval sets. So that's important to us. In addition to the idea that the LM is a greater approach, which we've been using for a long time, where at the end of it all, you might say, hey, look at the whole interaction, ask a model to be like, does this look good? And many times they'll tell you. Now, this is, of course, not perfect because the same AI that made the answer might actually, it might have been, like everybody's confused, including the grader. But this whole thing has gotten a lot worse with agentic workflows, especially customized agentic workflows, because you can't create a giant eval set for something that has either so many paths through it because it's so complex, or something where we let people customize the input and output completely.
Or it's stochastically generating its own paths.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is, I think, goes back to this question of our first thought is, well, if we're going to, as part of our value of Box is to provide some help with things that like assisting the person, how would the person do it?
Yeah.
And so sometimes that turns into like us saying things like, you go through the process, and at the end of it, you have like a QA person. So you actually have the process then like mimic what like a different objective, a different step in an agentic workflow where you're like, do the thing that they clearly do is just to like, is this the right tone? Is this the right and then that's not a solve where you always know it's right, but at the same time that kind of helps you get rid of some of the more sort
stuff.
of
Is it longer than 500 words?
Yeah.
Is it constrained in some way?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we had an example that a lot of our customers like, which is that many companies, they have these like set of questions you get, like RFPs, requests for proposals, or security questionnaires, all these other things. And so if you're in sales or dealing with analysts or whatever, you get these all the time, and they just take forever to and every question is always a little bit different.
Yep.
Right? And so AI is like really good at this because not only like in Box, you can put all of your data somewhere and then have ask the question and it'll figure out the answer. So the first natural approach is that somebody went through and they would copy paste. And then agentically, you could actually have the agents look at the questions, go get the answers and fill it in.
Yep.
But then if you're not careful, you end up with these really bizarrely different answers,
Yes.
like because every interaction of the agent was different. And so then naturally, the response is that we think of as like, well, have another agent go through and
Enforce some sort of consistency.
like rewrite it to be
check
consistent. And so we were talking to the customer about this, and they're like, yeah, that's what we do. We have like the person go through and double check for tone and for consistency.
Makes total sense.
Yeah, and so that kind of thing is like we start to ask, what would you do in this case? And then sometimes you can represent that agentically.
And do you have some way, like we at Anthropic frequently think about safety by default, but safety by default means safety against existential risk, terrorism, biochemical warfare, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
How do you, like we try to provide trust by verification also. How do you protect your customers from wrong answers, from this sort of thing?
Yeah, so there's one of the things that is very important to us is that we use safe models.
Yes.
So thank you, because the fact that you have the ability to have safe models means that we can then provide safe models to our customers. And that's important to us. We don't want to use a model that wasn't safe. And now, because we have an enterprise use case, though, we typically don't have the same set of of those kind of challenges that you might have if you had just an open to the internet,
That
like
makes sense.
anybody using this stuff. And in fact, like most of our customers will come to us and say, like, what are the guidelines that we should be thinking about? And we publish a set of guidelines at Box to say, this is how we expect you to use these models. And we're going to help protect the fact that you won't, like if somebody did try to do something that would be considered to be unsafe, then it won't work. Again, partially, like we test the fact that you guys do this. But then we also rely on the fact that if the customer owns the content and they own the logs and they own the ability to see the interactions, then they'll have the ability to then manage it internally in the same way they manage, like, again, the input and output is theirs.
They have a compliance team, you have a compliance team, we have a compliance team, we all sort of work together.
So in practice, I think for an enterprise company, this is a little bit less of a challenge than for
Makes sense. Makes sense.
And in fact, one of the things that we found was that if you're not careful, like something that an enterprise would consider very normal, like the AI models, like especially early on, would like consider to be inappropriate.
Like an attorney presenting evidence to a judge or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Or we have a lot of media and entertainment clients. And
Oh, that makes sense.
And I remember when we ran a first eval set of a model before, it got a horrible score. And we're like, this is supposed to be the new really good model. And then we looked and it had failed every example that involved like anything related to media and entertainment because it was like, this is inappropriate.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, yeah, that's like a story or script or analysis of something that's entertainment, right? But it looked at it as like, no, and so it actually became hard because people will jailbreak your protections by trying to think of it like a movie, but that's exactly the use case we needed, like, and so for legitimate purposes. So it's an ongoing approach. I will say the newest models seem to be much better at like figuring that part out.
That's great.
Yeah.
Looking ahead, what specific advancements in agent technology are you the most excited about?
I mean, for me, I feel like there's this promise of AI that we've all had for many years. And I think that agentic AI agents and the agentic approach, along with the newer models, the thinking models, the more time spent, the new approaches that we all use, these are ways by which we can sort of, as enterprise providers of technology, or as enterprises, can realize this value. I kind of don't know if everybody stuck to the old approach, if we would truly see the high expectations realized. Yeah. And so for me, the thing I really am interested in is this idea of all the things we're talking about, not just the early days like we're talking about here, but just seeing them evolve. Because like with all AI, like you can get far quickly. But to make it truly work well, you have to complete that last few percent.
Absolutely.
And oftentimes in an enterprise, that's a difference between I'm not going to use it and this is revolutionary. And so I see that we're on a journey that like, it's almost like if you look at the last 3 years, we got to the top of a mountain of AI assistant kind of thinking. And we're like, oh, we did it. And then we look and we're like, oh, no, actually, this is a plateau for this new giant mountain to get to where we want to be there. And I think that's great because it would be terrible if we got to the top of that mountain and said, you know what, this is it.
It's only been like 2 years. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I hope you make a better model.
It's going to be way better.
Then, so the idea of us sort of like all, Box, our world of providing AI and content, but also everybody else. Like everybody is thinking about ways to use these models in new and valuable ways. And that is, so we're all trying to work together on it as well. I'm a big fan of not just that Box has AI agents or that like Salesforce has AI agents, but they work together.
But they communicate. Yeah. That's right. They collaborate together.
And this is, I think, is another part of the future. It's not just that there's one AI agent that does everything, but like there's in the same way that people or platforms specialize, and certainly the data is in different places, they need to cooperate. And that will be a big part of the future as well. So I'm a big fan of the idea that you can say in a company, I need to do something. My enterprise has a concept of AI agents, but then I also use this feature from name your SaaS platform or Box, and I'm going to use the AI agents here to help me, and I'll use the agent here to help me, and then they're going to work together and help. Like, and so you almost always have, like in the same way that you almost always have like a computer device available to help you, you'll always have AI agents and agentic sort of approaches to these AI agents that will then help you through a number of things throughout your day.
Yeah, I'm super excited about where we began with AI calling tools, calling endpoints as if they were software clients themselves, moving to a place where they are communicating with one another, just like you say, over some common protocol, however it is, and collaborating from the perspective of each of the vendor that created them.
And actually on that topic, I think Anthropic has given a gift to the world, not only just very good models, but also from the idea that you said, here's a standard tool calling approach, and it's not specific to Anthropic. It's a generic way. It's a model context protocol, right? So when you have like your own MCP servers and you have the idea of this is a general way to like sort of instruct the way that people can utilize your platform when they are thinking agentically.
This is who I am. This is how you should communicate with me, and why you should communicate with me.
Yeah. So my opinion on it, and I'm going to ask you sort of if I'm in the same ballpark, has been that it was originally announced and it was to some fanfare, but then lately it has really accelerated. Like I see almost everyone now like talking about MCP as the way to obviously to do things going forward. Even non-Anthropic, people who don't use Anthropic talk this way. So what do you see from the
I mean, certainly that's what we hope for, right? I do think that there needs to be a common way for agents to talk to agents and agents to talk to endpoints. And if that way is built in the open and in common, right, we can all build against that standard, and it won't be a fractious environment, and we'll be able to communicate in the same lingua franca, right? I think part of what you're seeing, and I'm glad you're seeing that, it is very validating, but I think part of the reason it's taking off more and more and more is that the model intelligence expressed in 3.5 version 2 or 3.6 increased the ability for the agents to act autonomously, but in 3.7 we leapfrogged ourselves in that one. So the better the agents are, the more capable the agents are in acting independently and acting in flocks and groups, the more this is going to be necessary, and the more you're going to see it get adopted.
I think it's when a vendor can publish something that's useful for them in addition to the world. I think it's a gift that we all appreciate. All right, so that was my thoughts on like what's next with AI. How about you? From your perspective, what are you excited about? Maybe 1 year, 2 years, 3 years in AI agents or anything.
1 year, 2 year, 3 years is so long.
I know. 1 year or infinity.
Yeah, exactly. No, having just come off a model release recently, I am thinking frequently about what the boundaries of intelligence look like, right? There's an obvious market fit with coding, and a lot of our customers are doing coding, and I think part of the reason is because there's no upper bound in the intelligence necessary to write good code, or at least we have not reached that upper bound. So we're the most adequate. Like, I'm very proud of our most recent model, but I do believe we're going to continue getting better and better and better. And I think part of the reason we're here talking about agents specifically is that another place where unbounded intelligence is necessary is anywhere you can accrue errors, right? If you can avoid that supervisor, if you can self-reflect and plan more and more complex tasks and complete them successfully, I mean, one of my metaphors here, I come from a cloud operations world, and I often think about the problem of describing whether or not an incident is an outage or an event is an incident, right? That's something like, it's very hard to build a workflow around. But the agent could not only describe it as an outage, it could page the right people, it could figure out the root cause analysis, and it could even resolve it before waking anybody up, or at least it could try. And I want to get to that place where, with the increases in intelligence, we can solve these unbounded tasks for people without waking them up, without asking them for their input or following a process, right? And I'm very excited for that.
So is there anything like upcoming, the thing that like you want people to know who are watching this? What is the one thing on your mind that they should know?
Well, I think Box has shown building complex agent is possible, and I want them to know that it's possible, and I'd like to hear about the agents that they build. Thank you so much for having me here. It was a lot of fun to talk about AI and AI agents and what Box is doing with them. Really at the state of the art. I hope people have something to learn from this, but I also look forward to keeping the conversation going.
Absolutely, we love it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.